After her dad, who was a secret billionaire, died, her husband divorced her to marry her best friend. She was left with nothing but pain and betrayal. What she found in her father's safe deposit box 3 months later would make them all pay in ways they never expected. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, love, family secrets, and the cost of underestimating a grieving daughter. Viewers, before we get into this story, do me a favor. If you love stories about justice, revenge, and unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a like on this video, it helps more than you think, and comment below telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Houston, Chicago, or London? I want to know. Now let's get into this story, because it's about to get intense. The rain was hitting hard against the windows of Riverside General Hospital. Every drop felt like a reminder of the storm that had settled over Sarah Malek's life. She sat in the cold waiting room, her hands pressed together so tight her fingers had gone white. The lights above buzzed in a dull white glow. Doctors walked by quickly, not saying a word. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped in a slow, steady rhythm. Her father, Omar Malek, was lying 2 rooms away, breathing through a machine. The cancer came fast and cruel, with no warning. 3 months from the first doctor's visit to this moment. 3 months of watching the strongest man she had ever known fade into something she barely recognized. Sarah's phone buzzed in her lap. She looked at the screen. Her husband, Daniel. The message read, "Still at the hospital? I'm going out with some friends. Don't wait up." She stared at those words, her throat tight. No, "How is he?" No, "Do you need me?" Just a casual brush off, like her father wasn't dying 20 feet away. She didn't reply. She turned the phone face down and let the silence wrap around her again. Across from her sat Lila, her best friend since college. Lila had arrived an hour ago with tea and tissues, her face full of worry. She reached over and held Sarah's hand. "He's strong, Sarah. Your dad is a fighter." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She wanted to believe it, but the doctors had been clear. Hours, maybe a day at most. A nurse appeared at the door, her face soft but tired. "Mrs. Malek, you can go in now." Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. Lila rose beside her, but Sarah shook her head gently. "I need to do this alone." Lila nodded. "I'll be right here." Sarah walked down the hall, every step heavier than the last. When she pushed open the door, the beeping grew louder. Her father lay under white sheets, tubes running from her arms, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Sarah pulled a chair close and took his hand. It was cold. Too cold. "Baba," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm here." Omar's eyes fluttered open, just barely. His lips moved, working to form words around the breathing tube. Sarah leaned closer. "Safe deposit box," Omar whispered, the words barely there. "First Central Bank, box 312. The key is in my old brown wallet, inside the right pocket, hidden behind the photo." Sarah's brow wrinkled. "Baba, don't worry about that now. Just rest." Omar's grip tightened with a strength that surprised her. "Promise me. You go. You open it. Don't tell anyone. Not Daniel, not Lila. No one." The urgency in his voice sent a chill through her body. "I promise, Baba. I promise." Omar's eyes softened. A faint smile touched his lips. "My dear girl, you are stronger than you know. Remember that. When the storm comes, you stand." "Baba, please." "I love you, my child." His voice faded, the words dissolving into breath. The machines began to scream. Doctors and nurses rushed in, moving Sarah aside. She stood frozen against the wall as they worked, their voices sharp and urgent. But she already knew. She could feel it, the way you feel a door closing in an empty house. At 11:52 p.m., Omar Malek, age 61, was pronounced dead.
Sarah stood in the rain outside the hospital, staring at nothing. Lila wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward the car. The world felt muffled and far away, like she was watching her own life through a foggy window. When they arrived at her apartment, Daniel was there, lying on the couch with a beer in his hand, watching sports highlights on TV. He glanced up. "Oh, he's gone?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. He took a sip of his beer. "That's rough. Sorry, babe." That was it. No hug, no words of comfort, just a casual nod before his eyes drifted back to the screen. Lila gave him a look of pure disgust but said nothing. She guided Sarah to the bedroom, helped her out of her coat, and sat with her on the edge of the bed. "Do you want me to stay?" Lila asked softly. "I just need to sleep." Lila pulled her into a tight hug. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it, Sarah. Anything." When Lila left, Sarah lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent except for the low sound of the TV in the living room. She kept replaying her father's last words. Safe deposit box. Don't tell anyone. What could possibly be in there? The funeral was held on a gray Saturday morning at Green Valley Mosque, the same place where her father had prayed for over 30 years. The hall was filled with faces Sarah barely knew. Distant relatives, old coworkers, neighbors who had not spoken to her father in years but showed up anyway, drawn by the gravity of death. Sarah sat in the front row, dressed in black, her face calm. Daniel sat beside her, checking his phone every few minutes. On her other side, Lila was quietly wiping her eyes, her hand resting gently on Sarah's arm. The imam spoke about Omar's kindness, his devotion to his daughter, his quiet dignity. Sarah heard the words but didn't really take them in. She felt hollow, like something important had been scooped out of her. After the service, people came with their condolences. "He was a wonderful man. He's in a better place. If you need anything, just let us know." Sarah nodded and thanked them, her responses automatic. As the crowd thinned, Daniel leaned close. "I'm gonna head out. Got a work thing I can't skip." She turned to him slowly. "A work thing? Today?" He shrugged. "It's important, babe. I'll catch up with you later." He kissed her forehead, a quick, empty gesture, and walked out before she could say anything. Lila watched him go, her jaw tight. "That man is unbelievable." Sarah said nothing. She was too tired to defend him, too tired to feel anything at all. That night, Sarah sat alone in her father's small apartment, the two-bedroom place in the South Side where she had spent school holidays and summer breaks. The furniture was worn but clean. The walls were covered with old family photos. Her father's presence was everywhere, in the smell of cardamom tea, in the neatly folded prayer rugs, in the Urdu books stacked beside the reading chair. She walked into his bedroom, slowly, like she was entering a sacred space. On the dresser sat the old brown leather wallet she had seen him carry her whole life. Sarah picked it up carefully and opened it. Inside were a few worn notes, an old ID, and a small photo of her as a child. She ran her fingers behind it and felt something, a small brass key taped to the back. She held it up to the light, her heart beating faster. The key was small and old, marked with the number 312. She closed her fingers around it and whispered into the silence, "Okay, Baba, I'm listening."
The next morning, Sarah stood outside First Central Bank, the key heavy in her coat's pocket. The building was old, solid red brick with tall stone columns, the kind of place that had survived decades by refusing to change. She walked inside, her footsteps echoing across the polished stone floor. A woman at the front desk looked up with a polite smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Sarah pulled out the key. "I need to access a safe deposit box, number 312. The woman's smile faltered slightly. She looked at the key, then at Sarah. "May I see some identification?" Sarah handed over her national ID card. The woman typed something into her computer. Her expression shifted from polite to confused, then to something close to alarm. "One moment, please." She disappeared into a back office. Sarah waited, a quiet unease creeping up her spine. A man in a dark suit came out, his face serious. "Miss Mollick?" "Yes." "I'm James Harland, the branch manager. Please follow me." He led her down a narrow hallway, past rows of safe deposit boxes set into the walls. He stopped at 312, inserted his key alongside hers, and turned them both. The door opened. Inside was a single, thick brown envelope. James stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. "Take all the time you need. When you're finished, just let me know." Sarah pulled the envelope out, her hands shaking slightly. She carried it to a small private room, sat down, and opened it. Inside were documents, lots of them. Share certificates, property deeds, bank statements, legal papers with company names she didn't recognize, businesses she had never heard of. And at the bottom, a handwritten letter on cream-colored paper. Sarah unfolded it slowly. "My dearest Sarah," it began, in her father's steady handwriting, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and it is time you knew the truth about who I really was." Sarah's breath caught. She read on, her eyes widening with every line. "I was not the man you thought I was. I was not just a retired school principal, a quiet father doing his best. I was all of those things, yes, but also much more. My real name was Omar Siddiqui before I became Omar Malik. I came from wealth, Sarah, real wealth, generations of it. But I walked away from that life when I was 25 because I refused to take over my family's business and marry into a deal I did not believe in. They cut me off. I built a new life from nothing. I wanted you to know the value of hard work, humility, and independence. I never told you because I did not want that world to touch you while you were growing up. But now everything I built in secret, it is yours." Sarah's hands were trembling. She went through the documents again, her mind struggling to take it all in. Her father had owned a portfolio of shares worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He owned commercial buildings across 4 states. He had accounts in banks she had never heard of, holding amounts that did not feel real. At the bottom of the stack was a summary document, typed and notarized. Total estimated value of estate, $2.4 billion. Sarah stared at the number until it blurred. She read it again and again. Her father, the man who repaired his own shoes and packed his own lunch, who worked extra hours to help pay for Sarah's university books, had been worth nearly $2.5 billion, and he had never said a single word. Sarah sat in that small room for over an hour, reading and rereading every document, trying to make sense of what she was holding. The letter explained that everything had been placed in protected trusts managed by a law firm in New York, kept out of public records to protect Sarah. "When you are ready," her father had written, "contact the firm. They will help you understand everything. But Sarah, be very careful who you trust. Money changes people. It shows who they really are. Protect yourself. Protect your heart. And remember, you are my daughter. You are stronger than you know." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She walked out past the branch manager, who watched her with quiet respect, and out into the daylight. The world looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. She pulled out her phone and stared at Daniel's name in her contacts. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Don't tell anyone. Not Daniel." For the first time, Sarah wondered if her father knew something she didn't. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and walked to her car, the envelope tucked under her arm. The storm her father had warned her about was coming, and Sarah was about to find out just how strong she really was.
Sarah drove home in a daze, the envelopes.
The room tilted. Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? I'm not happy, he continued, his voice flat, rehearsed. I haven't been for a while. We've grown apart. You've been so focused on your dad, and I need something different. My dad just died, Sarah said slowly, her voice shaking. 2 weeks ago, Daniel. 2 weeks. I know the timing isn't ideal. Isn't ideal? She stood up, anger flaring hot and sudden. My father just died, and you're telling me you want a divorce? He stood too, defensive now. I didn't plan this, Sarah, but I can't keep pretending. It's not fair to either of us. Who is she? His face went blank. What? There's someone else. I'm not stupid, Daniel. Who is she? There's no one else, he said, but his eyes shifted away for just a second. That second told Sarah everything. Her voice went cold. Get out. Sarah, get out. He grabbed his jacket, moving quickly. Guilty. I'll come back for my things later. My lawyer will be in touch. And just like that, he was gone. Sarah stood in the empty apartment, her breath coming in uneven gasps. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to fall apart. But instead, she sat on the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and let the tears come in silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lila. Hey, you okay? Haven't heard from you today. Want me to come over? Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, Daniel just asked for a divorce. The reply came in seconds. What? I'm coming over right now. 20 minutes later, Lila was at the door, pulling Sarah into a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I can't believe he would do this to you, especially now. They sat on the couch, and Sarah told her everything. Well, almost everything. She left out the part about the envelope, about the billions sitting in trusts with her name on them. Lila listened, her face full of sympathy and anger. He's a coward. You deserve so much better. I don't even know what to do, Sarah admitted. Everything is falling apart. You're going to survive this, Lila said firmly. You're going to get through it, and you're going to come out stronger, I promise. As the days passed, Sarah found a lawyer and filed a response to Daniel's divorce petition. The process moved faster than she expected. Daniel wanted it quickly, and Sarah didn't have the energy to fight. She still hadn't told anyone about the money. Part of her wanted to throw it in Daniel's face, to watch him realize what he was walking away from. But her father's voice kept her silent. Don't tell anyone. Be careful who you trust. 3 weeks after Daniel left, Sarah was sitting in a quiet cafe reviewing papers from her lawyer when she saw them. Daniel and Lila. They were at a corner table, sitting close, his hand covering hers. Lila laughed at something he said, her eyes bright, her smile wide. Sarah's blood went cold. She watched as Daniel leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss, the kind that spoke of closeness, of history, of something that had been growing for longer than 3 weeks. Sarah's hands trembled. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and walked toward their table. They didn't notice her until she was standing right there. Lila looked up. The color left her face. How long? Sarah's voice was quiet, deadly calm. Daniel shifted in his seat. Sarah, listen. How long? She repeated, her eyes locked on Lila. Lila's mouth opened and closed. It just happened. After your dad died, we were both trying to be there for you, and we connected. After my dad died, Sarah raised her voice, or before. Silence. Daniel cleared his throat. It doesn't matter now. Lila and we're together. Sarah looked at the woman she had called her best friend for 10 years. The woman who'd held her while she cried. The woman who had helped her pack up her father's apartment while sleeping with her husband. You're supposed to be my best friend, Sarah whispered. Lila's eyes filled with tears. I am. I never meant for this to happen, Sarah, but I love him, and he loves me.
He's still married to me. Not for long, Daniel said coldly. The papers will be final next week. Sarah felt something inside her snap, but instead of breaking, it hardened into something cold and sharp. She smiled. You're right. The papers will be final next week, and then you two can have each other. She turned and walked out of the cafe, her head high, refusing to let them see her fall apart. Outside, she leaned against the wall, gasping for air. Her phone buzzed, an email from Robert Lane. Ms. Lane, we really need to schedule that meeting. There are time-sensitive matters regarding your father's estate that require your attention. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Sarah stared at the email. Time-sensitive matters, billions of dollars, a whole life her father had hidden to protect her, and now 2 people who had betrayed her in the worst possible way, who thought she was just a grieving widow with nothing. She pulled up Robert's number and dialed. He answered on the first ring. Ms. Lane. I'm ready, Sarah said, her voice steady. I want to come to New York. I want to know everything. Excellent. I'll have tickets waiting for you tomorrow. First class, direct flight. A car will pick you up at JFK. Thank you, Mr. Lane. One more thing, Miss Lane. Once we finalize everything, your life is going to change dramatically. Are you prepared for that? Sarah thought about Daniel, about Lila, about the way they had looked at her in that cafe, like she was pitiful, like she was nothing. Yes, she said quietly, I'm prepared. That night, Sarah packed a small bag. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She left a message for her landlord, paid 3 months' rent in advance, and locked the door behind her. The flight to New York was smooth and surreal. Sarah sat in first class for the first time in her life, sipping champagne she could barely taste, staring out at clouds that looked like mountains. When she landed, a black car was waiting exactly as Robert had promised. The driver held a sign with her name on it, opened the door for her, and drove her into Manhattan. The offices of Siddiqui and Lane were on the top 3 floors of a sleek glass building overlooking Central Park. Sarah stepped out of the elevator into a world of marble floors, modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows. Robert Lane met her in the lobby, a man in his 60s, tall and calm, with silver hair and kind eyes. Ms. Lane, he said warmly, shaking her hand, thank you for coming. Please follow me. He led her into a large private meeting room where 3 other lawyers were seated alongside a financial advisor and an estate planner. For the next 4 hours, they walked Sarah through everything. The shares, the real estate, the overseas accounts, the trusts, the properties in London, Dubai, and Cape Town that her father had built over decades of quiet, careful investing. Her father hadn't just been wealthy, he'd been a financial genius, building an empire from the shadows while living like he had nothing. Your father was very clear in his instructions. Everything is yours with no restrictions. The trusts became active on your 28th birthday or upon his death, whichever came first. As of 3 weeks ago, you became one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. Sarah leaned back, overwhelmed. Why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted you to know who you were before you knew what you had, Robert said gently. He wanted you to build your own character, your own strength, and from what I can see, he succeeded. By the time the meeting ended, Sarah had signed dozens of documents, set up new accounts, and hired a team to manage her assets. She walked out of that building a different woman than the one who'd walked in. She checked into a suite at the Four Seasons, ordered room service, and sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. We need to finalize the settlement. My lawyer says you're not responding. Let's just get this done. Sarah smiled coldly. She opened her laptop and wrote to her own lawyer. Proceed with the divorce as planned. I am not contesting anything. He can have the apartment, the car, whatever he wants. I don't need any of it. She hit send and turned off her phone. Tomorrow she'd fly back. Tomorrow she'd start the life her father had prepared for her. But tonight, she let herself feel everything. The grief, the betrayal, the anger, and beneath it all, a quiet spark of something new: power.
6 months passed like a dream. Sarah was still half convinced it wasn't real. She had returned from New York a different woman, though no one could see it yet. She moved out of the apartment she had shared with Daniel and into a modest rental in the city center. She dressed the same, drove the same 10-year-old Toyota, and kept her same job as a graphic designer at a small marketing agency. To everyone who knew her, she was just Sarah Malik, the woman whose father had died and whose husband had left her for her best friend, an object of pity and quiet gossip. But beneath that surface, everything had changed. Sarah spent her evenings on video calls with Robert and his team, learning the details of her empire. She studied market reports, property files, and investment strategies. Her father had built something extraordinary, and Sarah was determined to understand every piece of it. She learned that her father owned a controlling stake in 3 major companies, including a technology firm that was about to go public. He owned commercial properties in 14 states and residential buildings in 5 countries. He had art collections in climate-controlled storage and a portfolio of rare manuscripts worth millions. And Sarah controlled all of it. She watched from a distance as Daniel and Lila moved in together. They posted photos on social media, smiling and carefree, looking like the perfect couple. Sarah saw the comments from mutual friends, the congratulations, the heart emojis. It should have hurt, but it didn't, because Sarah knew something they didn't. Revenge wasn't about emotion. It was about timing. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning. Sarah signed the papers at her lawyer's office, her expression calm. Daniel got the apartment, his car, and half of their joint savings, about $14,000. He thought he had won. That same afternoon, Sarah called Robert. "I'm ready to make my first move," she said. "What do you have in mind?" "Daniel works for Preston & Partners, a mid-sized consulting firm. I want to know who owns it." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Looks like it's privately held. The main shareholder is a private equity group called West Point Capital." "Can we buy it?" Robert's tone shifted, interested. "West Point has been looking to sell several of their holdings. It would take some negotiating, but yes, it's possible." "Do it quietly. I don't want my name on anything." "Understood. What are you planning?" Sarah's voice was calm and cold. "I'm going to teach him what it means to underestimate someone." 3 weeks later, the deal was done. Sarah, through a chain of shell companies and trusts, became the majority owner of Preston & Partners. Daniel had no idea. She joined her first board meeting by video call, her face unseen, her voice disguised through a modulator. She listened as the executives discussed restructuring and cost-cutting. When they finished, Sarah spoke. "I want a full review of all senior consultants, performance numbers, client feedback, billable hours. I want to know who is contributing and who is just coasting." The CEO nodded. "Of course, we'll have that ready within the week." A week later, the report came back. Daniel's numbers were average at best. He billed fewer hours than his colleagues, had mixed client reviews, and spent more time at networking events than at his desk. Sarah made a note and moved on. She didn't fire him, not yet. That would be too easy. Instead, she put in place a new policy. All senior consultants would have to compete for new projects. No more guaranteed clients, no more coasting on seniority. Daniel suddenly found himself fighting for every account, and he wasn't very good at it. Within 2 months, his commissions had dropped by 60%. He started staying late at the office, stressed, short-tempered with his colleagues. Lila posted less on social media. The photos of their perfect life slowed to almost nothing. Sarah watched from the shadows, a ghost in her own empire, but she wasn't done.
She learned through public records and social media that Daniel had taken out a large loan to buy an engagement ring for Lila. He had proposed the month before. Lila said yes. They were planning a spring wedding in Tulum, Mexico. They had sent save the dates to all their friends.
Sarah saw the card that someone had posted online. It had a photo of Daniel and Layla on a beach, laughing, holding hands, looking completely happy. She felt nothing. Well, almost nothing. There was a cold, quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you hold every card while your opponents don't even know they're playing. She made another call to Robert. "I want to set up a scholarship fund, in my father's name, the Omar Malik Scholarship for first-generation university students. I want it to be real, substantial, full tuition, housing, books, everything." "That's a wonderful idea," Robert said warmly. "How much are you thinking?" "Start with 40 million. We can grow it from there." There was a brief pause. 40 million. "We can certainly do that. I'll have our foundation team draw up the paperwork. And Miss Malik, I want to ask, are you ready for your name to be public? Once it's out there, it will change everything." "I'm ready." The announcement came on a Wednesday morning. Major news outlets picked it up immediately. Sarah Malik, daughter of the late Omar Malik, has established a $40 million scholarship fund for first-generation university students. Miss Malik, recently identified as the sole heir to the Siddiqui fortune, plans to expand the program nationally over the next 5 years. The story included Sarah's photo, a professional portrait taken the week before. She looked poised, elegant, powerful. Within hours, her phone was buzzing, journalists requesting interviews, old friends reaching out, distant relatives she had never heard of wanting to reconnect, and 2 calls that never came: Daniel, Layla. Sarah knew they had seen the news. Everyone had. The story was everywhere. She could imagine them in their apartment, staring at the headlines, realizing what they had walked away from, realizing who she had been all along. She didn't call them. She didn't gloat. She simply moved forward. That evening, she attended a charity gala downtown, her first public appearance since the announcement. She wore a deep green gown, elegant and understated, and walked into the ballroom with her head high. People noticed. Whispers moved through the crowd, but Sarah moved through it all with grace, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, acting as if she had been doing this her whole life. Halfway through the evening, she saw them, Daniel and Layla, standing near the bar. They had been invited weeks ago, back when they were just another young couple trying to make connections. They saw her the same moment, the color drained from both their faces. Sarah smiled and walked over. "Daniel, Layla, what a surprise." Daniel couldn't speak. Layla's eyes were wide, darting around the room like she was looking for an exit. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said, pleasantly. "Spring wedding in Tulum, right?" Layla nodded weakly. "I hope you both have a wonderful time," Sarah continued, her voice light and friendly. "You both deserve each other." The words hung in the air, their meaning clear. Daniel finally found his voice. "Sarah, I didn't know about your father, about the money. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," Sarah said softly. "That was the point." "If I had known, I would have—" "What?" Sarah asked, her voice hardened slightly. "Stayed? Pretended to love me for my bank account instead of leaving me for my best friend?" He had no answer. Sarah turned to Layla. "And you? How's work going?" Layla's face crumpled. "Sarah, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Sarah said simply. "You both did. And you know what I learned? Hurt people don't always break. Sometimes they build. Sometimes they become something their betrayers can't even imagine." She stepped back, her face calm. "Enjoy the rest of your evening. I certainly will." She turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, frozen. The next morning, Layla was fired. The 60-day improvement plan had been a formality.
Claire had already made the decision. Her severance was the legal minimum, and her professional reputation was in pieces. Daniel lost his biggest client the same week. No explanation was given. They just left. Within a month, he was laid off as part of a company restructuring. His severance was slightly better than Layla's, but not by much. Their engagement photo disappeared from social media. The wedding save-the-dates had gone out, but the wedding was quietly postponed, then canceled altogether. Sarah heard about it all through the grapevine. She didn't interfere. She didn't need to. She had set things in motion and stepped back. The rest took care of itself. 6 months after the gala, Sarah stood at the window of her new penthouse overlooking the city. She had finally moved out of the modest rental and into something that matched her reality. Her phone rang. It was Robert. "Just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" "I'm good," Sarah said, and she meant it. Really good. "Your father would be proud of you." Sarah's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. He wanted you to be strong, to be smart, to be someone who couldn't be broken, and that's exactly who you've become." After they hung up, Sarah sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She had work to do. The scholarship fund needed attention, her companies needed direction, there were properties to review, investments to analyze, and a future to build. She thought about Daniel and Layla sometimes, but not often. They had made their choices. They had shown who they really were, and in doing so, they had set Sarah free to become who she was always meant to be, the woman her father had raised, the woman who could survive anything. As she worked, her father's letter sat in a frame on her desk, the final lines visible. "When the storm comes, you stand. You are stronger than you know." Sarah had stood, and she was still standing. The storm had come and gone, and she had come out of it not just whole, but transformed. She picked up her phone and sent one last message to Robert. "Let's expand the scholarship fund. Double the amount. I want to help more students who understand what it means to start from nothing and build something real." His reply came quickly. "Consider it done." Sarah set the phone down and looked out at the city again. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Layla were dealing with the results of their own choices, learning hard lessons about betrayal and consequences. But Sarah wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about tomorrow, about the students whose lives would change because of her father's legacy, about the businesses she would build, the difference she would make, and the woman she would continue to become. Her father had given her more than money. He'd given her wisdom, strength, and purpose, and Sarah wasn't going to waste a single bit of it. The sun set over the skyline, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. Sarah sat back in her chair, a cup of tea cooling on the desk beside her, and smiled. Not because she had won, but because she had survived. And sometimes that is the greatest victory of all.
What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Would you have forgiven them or made them face the consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you loved this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. See you in the next one.